Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President, officers of G2K and leaders, members. Good morning. Let the record show that I arrived on time, more or less. I want to thank you for inviting me to join you and to share my own thoughts on where we are now and the way forward in terms of the rebuilding of the Jamaica Labour Party. Since time is of the essence, I want to get straight into the subject matter. We are here because the Labour Party has had, although it has had a rich history as a party, 70 years old now, and we have had a history where every time we have been in government, we have tended to run the country better than than the People's National Party runs the government. If you track our performance since independence, you'll recognize that during the 1960s, we grew the economy by an annual average of 6% per year. In fact, in 1971, or thereabout, when I think none of you was born at that time, the economy grew in that single year by almost 12%. Now, what is of seminal importance in that piece of information is that in the entire 14-year tenure of Omar Davis as Minister of Finance, the economy grew by about the same percentage points, cumulatively. So the economy grew by 0.8% per year for 14 years under Omar Davis, growing in consequence by a mere 12% over 14 years. And that is what the economy grew by in one single year, 1971, under the stewardship of the Jamaica Labour Party government. I think that's a very, very stark comparison and contrast that you get right there. Then in the 1970s, the PNP took over in 1972. They got momentum. The first couple of years, 72, 73, they got the bounce out of that 6% growth in the previous decade. And then came the disaster that followed, which was 7 consecutive years of negative growth. That is to say, growth minus 0 for 7 consecutive years. Then the Labour Party came back in power. That was under Michael Manley and his wrecking crew. And then in 1980, the Labour Party came back in power. And under Edward Seaga, who was Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, we weathered the storm for the first half of the decade. We had one crisis after another. It's as if every time Labour Party comes in, we seem to be plagued by global crises of one or another. The entire bauxite and alumina sector was severely affected. In the same way in 2007 as it was also affected in the 1980s. And we formed an investment promotion company. I became initially the director of public relations and advertising, marketing, went overseas, director of North American operations, later group director for marketing and overseas offices. And we revved up investment promotion in a way that had never been seen before and has never been seen since we did that program in the 1980s. We were averaging 2 new investments per week, literally, when the investment program became in full swing. It came out of the Seaga visiting Washington, President Reagan, meeting with him, the first head of state that he met after becoming President of the United States. We set up the Rockefeller Committee, and we set up the investment promotion company, Jamaica National Investment Promotion. And I became a senior member, along with Corinne McClarty, in promoting investments into Jamaica. There's a whole long history of that we could talk about. The free zone created 40,000 new jobs in the free zone alone. And we created many jobs all around, even in the Spanish Town area. When the PNP came into power, all of that was closed down. And in Spanish Town, 40,000 jobs in the industrial belt were lost. And you saw a big wall built around that bypass in Spanish Town. It was a plan to build a free zone there called the Spanish Fort Free Zone. Not even the walls exist anymore, much less the dream of a Spanish Fort Free Zone. So after we rebuilt the economy in the 80s, we got back to 6% growth. From 1986 to 1990, the economy grew by 6% per year. Again, notice the two periods of 6% growth, the 60s and the 80s under the Labour Party administration. In 1987, the economy grew by 8%. And in 1988, despite Hurricane Gilbert, the economy grew by 3% in the middle of Hurricane Gilbert, all under the Jamaica Labour Party government. Then the PNP came in 89 through to 2007 and had a growth rate of just about 1% per year for 18 years. Unbelievable, right? Then we took over in 2007 and we got what? I was your Minister of Finance. We got, along with it, a global economic crisis, the worst the world had seen in 80 years. And we kept the economy stable. I left $2 billion in the net international reserves. I was able to borrow from the IMF, the World Bank, and the IDB over $3 billion United States dollars at less than 2% interest rate. That's per annum, by the way. And we were able to keep prices stable. The exchange rate was stable for over 2 years. You know what has happened now. The exchange rate has galloped away from $86 to $1 to now 100, approaching $105 to $1. The net international reserves has been cut in half, less than half, from $2 billion to now 910 million United States dollars at the end of September. And jobs that were promised by the present government, they offered us the JEEP, J-E-E-P, Jamaica Emergency Employment Program. Despite the JEEP, we have seen an increase of 3% in unemployment. Among your category, or most of you, the age group of 16 to 28, we have seen unemployment rise from 27%, which was unacceptable under me. It has gone now to 40% unemployment among young people. We have a real crisis in the country. And the government is saying, well, we have an IMF agreement and we have passed our first test. Well, the first test is always the easiest to pass. I passed the first test too. I even passed the second test. But you passed the first test, but guess what? You're not paying the bills. The soldiers are eating, and we're not paying the suppliers who supply the soldiers. Ask the bread people and ask the yam people and all those who pull together the contract for supply. Somebody's owed $20 million, they offer them $1 million. Persistent arrears exist throughout the government payment system. And they claim that they have a 5% under expenditure as part of why they'll pass the test. Sure, if you don't pay your bills, you can pass the test. And that's a fact. The same thing goes for even in the health area. A doctor told me recently that we have run out of polio vaccines in Jamaica. Polio vaccines in this day and age that we are in now. So much for the IMF agreement. And I could talk about that more, but in fact, what I can say about that is that one of the things that Peter Phillips has done and is doing is that he is following the IMF dogma to such an extreme point that he is choking off the opportunity for business expansion. Let me explain why. When I was minister, there were a whole series of things that I did, not necessarily all with the agreement of the IMF. And therein lies part of the reason, perhaps, why all of the reviews were not done on a timely basis. The main ones were, of course, tax reform and public sector reform and pension reform, which incidentally, none of these reforms has been implemented yet, although the PNP government said they would do it in 2 weeks after coming to power. almost 2 years now, and they have not implemented any of those three. Those were the three that were the main sticking points in the reviews with the IMF under my tenure. And those are the same three issues that remain unresolved to this very day. But there were other things that I did, because the IMF dogma is shut down everything, lock off everything. And my response is, if you lock off everything, how do you prepare the economy for growth again? How do you create some growth impulses? How do you find an opportunity to let the private sector encourage them, induce them to grow? What did I do? I cut stamp duty and transfer taxes sharply. The total combined cost of stamp duty and transfer taxes, after I cut it, came down from 7.5% down to 4%. That was significant. 3.5% in transfer costs is a significant reduction. The government has already started to turn it around in the wrong direction by increasing both transfer taxes and stamp duties by 1% in each case already. We abolished dividends tax, which is a form of double taxation. This government has come now and reimposed a 15% dividends tax. They, based on the plan we had, reduced corporate taxes for unregulated companies. That is to say, companies that are neither in, say, the financial sector or the telecommunications sector. We reduced corporate taxes from 33.33%. They did, it was our plan, to 25%. Under the IMF's watchful eye, they have now reimposed a 5% surcharge or surtax on those same companies. In other words, I give it to you and I take it away, right? So the 5% reimposition now means that in terms of the dividends tax of 15%, the 5% that is reimposed on corporate taxes for unregulated companies, it means that companies don't have money to expand, to reinvest, to create jobs. No wonder we can't find a Jeep. Nobody knows where the Jeep is anymore. Anywhere you go across the country, you can't find a Jeep, because unemployment is on its way up in the wrong direction again. Then, I'm now told that they're about to abolish the junior stock exchange, which I had started. What was the purpose of setting up the junior stock exchange? The purpose of setting up the junior stock exchange was to encourage more investment via equity rather than debt. Because one of the big problems of investing with too much debt, especially debt at high interest rates. Although in my time, you must appreciate that I brought interest rates down on mortgages to single digits. From an average of 20%, I brought it down to 9.5% before departing as Minister of Finance. Those were game-changing moves that I made. But this junior stock exchange was to go one step further. Forget about debt financing. Let's go equity financing. And it would give an opportunity for blue chip, privately owned companies to be induced into offering stocks to the public. Lasco took it up. Lastrin from Lasco took it up. He had run private businesses successfully over the years. And what's the inducement, of course? Taxation. A 5% holiday on profits tax. And in the next 2.5 years, I think a 25% holiday, or 50% holiday, and in the last 2.5 years, up to 10 years, a 25% holiday on taxes. Lasco took it up. Lasco, in consequence, decided instead of borrowing money from the banks or international institutions, they borrowed it from the people. Offered shares in Lasco to the people of Jamaica. And they raised and already invested $2.1 billion at White Mile in not just warehousing space, but critically factory space. And factory space to what? Add value. Not just to import, store, and sell, but to import raw materials, process, create jobs, and sell. And in consequence, not only did they invest 2.1 billion, which they raised on the stock exchange, they also created 500 jobs at White Mile. Now that is being replicated in a number of companies that have gone to the junior stock exchange. But alas, the government, led by a prime minister and a minister of finance, who continue to be socialists at heart and socialists in their mind, now allow the IMF to arbitrarily say to them, you have to cut the junior stock exchange. And they are about to cut the junior stock exchange, despite what Dr. Phillips has had to say. So this is a background, a quick background to where we are now as a political party and why I'm here addressing you today. What is happening now in the country is a situation where things are really bad. You know, I remember there was an army general who was sent to review the state of play in the battlefield in the World War, one of those world wars, and he went out and saw carnage unimaginable. And he came back, his superior said, well, General, what did you find? He says, gentlemen, I'm afraid to tell you that what I've seen out there is so bad, it is virtually impossible for me to exaggerate, but I will try. Now, in our circumstances, I don't need to exaggerate what's going on in the country. I don't need to exaggerate the fact that people on fixed incomes, whether they are in the public sector or otherwise, are really having it extremely difficult now. Because if they're on fixed incomes and prices have just shot up because the dollar has gone to hell, where a sachet of Lasco for nutrition for our little children, like babies, that has gone from $89 when we left power to $150 today for one little pack of Lasco. And this is why I've said, you know, that, and I'm consistent on this. When you hear that the inflation rate was 9.5% last year, the inflation rate for the people who are on limited incomes and have to rely on basic foods and basic things like electricity and water. Water going up now by what, 18, 20%? Electricity has probably gone up by about that increment over the past 2 years. It means that the actual inflation rate for people on limited and fixed incomes is higher. The 9.5% inflation is an inflation rate that covers everything. But when you take out the things that the marginal people, including public sector workers, rely on, you're going to find that the real inflation rate is about 20%. And in those circumstances, the public sector workers who are on a wage freeze are also suffering in consequence. In all of this, the opposition has seemed to be asleep. The opposition is not seeming to be getting ready to take over government again. The issue is that we have been made the first one-term government since independence. And the issue is the PNP is mismanaging the country so badly now that we need to get ready to make them the first one-term PNP government since independence. But the question is, we can't just talk it. We have to act it out. We have to be prepared. We have to get ready. We are now, ladies and gentlemen, at the midterm of the PNP government, believe it or not. The PNP tends to run for 4 years. They rarely ever last out their full 5-year term. 2 months' time, we are at the midterm then of the government of the People's National Party. And the question is, Mr. President, is the Jamaica Labour Party ready at this stage to be able to take over government from the People's National Party? I think not. Look at their conference recently held. You think the guest speaker was Portia Simpson-Miller? No. The guest speaker was P.J. Patterson. And P.J. Patterson said, forget about the government. He loved that word, you know, forget it. And forget about the government. He says, I'm talking to you here at conference about rebuilding the People's National Party for the next election. So here is this PNP government in your face, mismanaging People are suffering, but they don't care. They're getting ready to win the next election. And what are we doing? Settling down to be an opposition, to be in perpetual opposition for another 18 years? Is that what we're doing? It can't be. Labour Party has to begin in earnest, urgently, to rebuild. And in my consultations that I went around the country on, I found the labour rights feeling neglected, labour rights feeling abandoned, labour rights feeling used and let go. Now it's all well and good. Some will say, well, Mr. Shaw, you're a deputy leader. Why weren't you in rebuilding in your own area council? Of course I tried my best. We have had a lot of area council meetings and we have sought to talk about our defeat. But the issue is that when you have a defeat as a major party, there needs to be a structure around how you review your defeat. That's why we ordered the strategic review report. 2 professors from the university, a former permanent secretary, a man of the cloth from the church, all came together, spent a lot of time, cost us $3 or $4 million for the expenditure on this report. I hear the leader talking that he's the one who raised the money. I don't know how relevant that is. He's the leader of the party. And if he makes some calls in the name of the Jamaica Labour Party and raise the money, so what? It is still the ownership of the Jamaica Labour Party. It doesn't make the report the ownership of the leader because he raised the money. That makes no sense. What will make sense is for the leader to fulfill his commitment to make the report public and at least make the report available to the internal workings of the Jamaica Labour Party, including the deputy leaders and officers of the party. And we can work together. G2K too, you're involved? Yes. You're part of this. You're sponsoring advertising programs and all kinds of things during the last election campaign. So you think I want to go and take the blame? You think that Mr. Holness wants to take the blame? No. Right? We must be courageous enough to take the report, to let the chips fall where they may fall. And let us brush off ourselves, because failure is not falling down. Failure is when you don't get up, brush off your clothes and just keep on trucking. And that's what we have to do now. So that report is a hanging chad, and it remains an issue that has to be dealt with. Ladies and gentlemen, my time is drawing close to an end in this presentation. But if you're going to rebuild the party, we've got to have a talk with the 42 candidates who lost the election, a talk with the 175 parish council candidates who lost the election, and we lost, by the way, all 14 municipalities across the island. And it's certainly not good enough to, cross-talk with one of the so-called losing candidates. It's not good enough for the leader to say on a public platform that he doesn't deal with losers, he only deals with winners. That's most unfortunate. In fact, I think, quite frankly, I think the leader should apologize for that statement. I really think he should. Because if we're going to rebuild our great party, we must understand that we are all leaders. And in fact, we shouldn't be characterized as winners and losers. Okay? Maybe unsuccessful candidates, but guess what? For us to become government, most of those unsuccessful candidates must be restored, rebuilt, give them a sense of mission, vision, a sense of purpose, and supported in the victory that we must achieve if we want to become government again. And that's all I'm saying. If we don't start the rebuilding program now, when do we start? If we don't start it now, I put it to you, we're staring defeat straight in its face whenever it comes in the next couple of years. Let me say, I need 5 more minutes, Chairman. Let me say this let me say this to you in terms of the vision that we have to have. Because 3 V's I have, in my mind. I mentioned it at my launch in Mandeville. The first V is listening to the voice of the people. And you can't listen to the voice of the people by saying you don't deal with losers, you only listen to winners, right? So we have to listen to everybody. And the post-mortem from that report must be done. The postmortem was done, but we must now examine the postmortem report. And it has recommendations. Well, that's what I'm told. I can't go on like I saw it. But it has recommendations, right? Because we asked them to put recommendations in there, not just to say why we lost. So I'm assuming there are recommendations in the report. That's the point of departure going forward. But in going forward, in rebuilding, we have to have that vision of where we are going. I want to share this with you, this vision, before I come down. And also to say how I think, as a group, we can better coordinate our efforts. I have two simple visions for the Labour Party right now, because sometimes we can get carried away with this vision thing, you know, and you have all 5-hour speech about the vision, and when you're done, nobody don't want to know what the vision is. So sometimes we need to keep the vision simple, okay? Not to say that we're not educated and have the capacity to absorb complex matters, right? But to me, there are two simple things Jamaica needs to do. Number one, we must face up to the fact that the real crisis that exists in Jamaica is not the crisis of crime. It is not the crisis of poverty. It is not the crisis of all kinds of manifestations of underdevelopment. It is a crisis of human underdevelopment. That is our greatest crisis in Jamaica today. Because of the absence of adequate development of our people, our educational system is a wreck. Let's understand that. Because we don't educate our people properly and develop our people properly, we have a crisis of human underdevelopment that we cannot even sit down here and quantify it properly. Trace everything down to crime now. Crime and all this, domestic violence and all these things. These are all symptoms of the root cause, which is underdevelopment. Singapore and Jamaica were at the same level in 50 years ago, or 52 years ago at independence. They came to look at what we were doing here because they saw the growth and they were inspired. They came. Lee Kuan Yew came himself. And they went back. But what they concentrated on, because Lee Kuan Yew told it to me in a meeting with, I think it was Mr. Hugh Shearer, that I visited Singapore with Mr. Shearer as the Deputy Prime Minister of Jamaica in the 1980s. And Lee Kuan Yew said that the biggest thing he did in his country was to educate the people and make it easy to do business in Singapore. You like the simplicity of that? Educate the people and make it simple and easy to do business. And I respectfully believe we should adopt that principle for Jamaica. How do we educate our people? We have a dysfunctional system right now where we have 2,500 basic schools in Jamaica. About 500 of them are being run properly. Maybe another 500 half properly. And the other 1,500 are glorified mom and pop daycare centers. They don't have trained teachers who are trained in the science of early childhood education. That is a science. We don't even have a training system in our teacher training colleges that are geared to that cohort of children from ages 3 to 6. So in consequence, we start the factory of human underdevelopment when we keep these kids in these glorified daycare centers, inadequate nutrition, inadequate training, and when they reach 6, ready for primary school, they are functionally illiterate and innumerate. And then what do we have after that? We have a factory that continues up the line in primary school, up the line in high schools, and then we all run to graduation. All the MPs them run a graduation every year. Everybody walks slow up the thing with the cap and the gown. And the majority of those kids, especially in what you call non-traditional schools, are graduating without passing one single subject in CXC. Look at the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions. It tells you in there that 77% of our people are listed as unskilled. And that is defined as not having passed not one single subject in CXC, not even Caribbean religion. Not even Caribbean religion. No offense to Caribbean religion, don't get me wrong. Okay? But not one single subject. So, ladies and gentlemen, I say it is a crisis of human underdevelopment that we must begin to fix now, not tomorrow. And my policy going forward for the Labour Party is that when we become government again, the first order of business is to issue an edict that over a 3 to 5 year period, the government of Jamaica shall take over the entire infant school system in Jamaica. I phase it over a 5-year period because as a practical matter, it might become a matter of not only of financing, but it might become a matter of having all the resources lined up properly. So in other words, over the 5-year period, you know that you're going to change your system where, imagine right now, we are being told that we're training too many teachers. And there are teachers graduating now who don't have a job and can't find a job. When in fact, what we need to do is to get the curriculum into the teachers' colleges that train teachers how to teach the children from 3 to 6. And then redirect that training and get those teachers into the infant schools that are going to be government run. Phase it over a 5-year period and start the implementation right away. Listen, we did the implementation for cost sharing abolition and user fees in healthcare abolition. We did that as we said we would. And we will do the same for infant school education. If we don't start now, we are not going to deal with the crisis of human underdevelopment. Yes, we must also have remedial programs going into primary school and going into high schools as well. We must have remedial programs doing that. And that is something that will try to rescue those kids who are already in the system. But as we try to rescue them, in fact, I have a pilot project in my constituency just to do that right now. I've trained all of my teachers in primary schools. They have sent 1 or 2 teachers from each primary school. We have a series of seminars. I'm going to be purchasing the whiteboards with the smart stick and create excitement in the learning process as part of improving reading and comprehension. But that's remedial, okay? And that's not happening in the entire school system right now. So the crisis remains. But you start by dealing comprehensively by getting those kids literate, ready for learning by the time it's grade 1 for primary school. That is, when I see the Gleaner talk about where are the big ideas coming in this debate, this leadership contest. And I was down at Gleaner having lunch with them 2 days ago. And I turned to Oliver Clark, I said, how you talk about it? I don't have a big idea. This is a big idea. This is a big idea. Can you imagine the transformation and the revolution that it will create in Jamaica in 1 generation? Just imagine what will happen when we are able to cope with this human underdevelopment by starting at an equitable level for all of our children, regardless of whether their parents can afford private school or not. The private schools will continue, but every child in Jamaica is deserving of that critical attention at that critical learning age of 3 to 6 years old, including my own 4-year-old daughter, Christiana Isabel. Let me end by saying to you, I value and appreciate what you have done already as G2K. Because believe it or not, you have, in my estimation, you have morphed yourself into the formal young arm of the Jamaica Labour Party. It's a fact. It is a fact. And I want to congratulate you on the work that you have been doing. Now, what I want to say to you is it's time for you to spread your wings. I want you to be more penetrative. I am aware of the chapters that you have and the college-based chapters that you have and so on. But now I want to issue a charge. I want a chapter in every constituency across Jamaica. Every constituency must have at least 1 chapter of G2K. And I have a vision that one day every division must have a chapter of G2K. Can you imagine if in all 227 parish council divisions island-wide we have a chapter of G2K? Can you imagine now the leadership training, the mentorship program, Mr. President, the mentorship program that can now spread in a more democratic way across the party, because we want to be in a position for G2K to become a productive recruitment ground for the future leaders of the Jamaica Labour Party. And we want to say to you, have the chapters at the parish council levels as well, because nobody must snub their nose at being a parish council representative. Being a parish council representative is at the base of political representation. It is what politics is all about. Look at the PNP. See how many of their councillors have graduated to Parliament. We have a lesser number in our side, and we need to learn a lot in that. And I believe that you have the intellectual, intellectual power. You have the drive. And what I think we need to do now is to come together. You know, I met with the BITU a few days ago. They are the parent of the Labour Party. And I said to the BITU, let's work together, because BITU and JLP, we have fallen down. But in working together, we can rebuild the Labour Party and we can rebuild the BITU. In the same way, in working together with the young arm, the G2K, you can help to rebuild the Labour Party and we can help to build the G2K. But I want a situation where we have a more streamlined way, that we have political education that penetrates through you into the communities. And it becomes a serious and critical lifeline for the party, for us to be able to recruit leadership from you. You are the future of the party. You are the future of the party, and I don't want you to feel left behind. And so in our structure, we must be more deliberative. We can't be accidental about the role that you play. Okay? We have to define it more, maybe entrench it in the Constitution more, and make you feel and understand that you are part of the whole lifeblood of the Jamaica Labour Party. You are the future, and I'm looking forward to working with you. God bless you. Thank you very much.